1. Intro. Most people think being emotionally untouchable means becoming cold, distant, silent, like nothing ever reaches you anymore. But that's not strength. That's armor made of fear. The Stoics believed something far more dangerous. They believed true emotional power comes from clarity, not numbness. From seeing things exactly as they are, without letting them control you. Right now, your emotions might feel like reactions, like reflexes, like something that just happens to you. But what if they don't have to? What if the reason people can hurt you, anger you, or drain you, is not because they are powerful, but because you're still giving them permission? In this video, you'll learn the single Stoic rule that takes that permission away. A rule practiced by ancient philosophers, yet more relevant than ever in a noisy, reactive world. Before we go deeper, take a moment to subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. This channel exists to help you build inner strength, emotional discipline, and a mind no one can easily shake. Now, let's begin. 2. The modern problem. Evelyn doesn't think of herself as weak. She tells herself she's just empathetic. She feels deeply. She listens closely. She gives people the benefit of the doubt, again and again. But every night, when the world finally goes quiet, her thoughts get louder. She replays conversations. She wonders why certain words stayed with her longer than they should have. Why one careless comment can ruin an entire day. Daniel, on the other hand, believes emotions are a liability. He prides himself on being rational, controlled, unbothered. At least, that's what he shows the world. Inside, it's different. He suppresses frustration until it leaks out as sarcasm. He ignores resentment until it turns into distance. He avoids sadness until it shows up as exhaustion. Both Evelyn and Daniel are being ruled by emotion. Not because they feel too much, but because they never learned where emotion ends and choice begins. Modern life rewards reaction. Instant replies, instant outrage, instant validation. We're trained to respond before we reflect. Someone disrespects you, and your body reacts before your mind does. A message goes unanswered, and your mood shifts without permission. A stranger's opinion suddenly carries weight it never earned. This isn't emotional sensitivity. It's emotional captivity. The problem isn't that people feel. The problem is that they confuse feeling with truth. They assume every emotion deserves obedience. And in that confusion, they hand over control to people who don't even know they exist. 3. Stoic framework. Seneca would look at Evelyn and Daniel and say the same thing he said 2,000 years ago. Your suffering isn't proof that life is cruel. It's proof that your mind is treating impressions like facts. The Stoics had a word for this, an impression. A first hit of meaning. A story your brain attaches to an event before you even notice it. Someone speaks sharply to you. The event is sound waves and a facial expression. But the impression says, they disrespected me. They don't value me. I'm being rejected. And the body responds as if that story is reality. The Stoic framework begins with one disciplined pause. Separate the event from your judgment about the event. Epictetus said it plainly. It's not things that upset us, but our opinions about things. That line isn't philosophy for a poster. It's a tool. Because if your emotion is coming from your judgment, then your emotion is not a command. It's a signal. A signal that your mind made an interpretation. And that interpretation can be questioned. The Stoics weren't trying to kill emotion. They were trying to stop being owned by it. So when anger arises, the Stoic asks, what am I assuming right now? What story am I believing? Is this certain, or is this just an impression? And in that moment, something powerful happens. Emotion stops being a prison and becomes information. This is the root of being emotionally untouchable. not numbness, not distance, but the ability to choose your meaning before the world chooses it for you. 4. The rule explained. The rule itself is simple, but it's uncomfortable. And that's why most people never practice it. The Stoic rule says this: you are not disturbed by what happens, but by the meaning you assign to it. Not the tone of the message, not the look on their face, not the silence after you spoke. The disturbance begins when your mind adds a story. Someone ignores you. The event is absence. But the meaning becomes, I'm not important. I've been dismissed. I've lost status. That meaning feels automatic. But it isn't inevitable. The Stoics trained themselves to insert a space, a narrow gap between stimulus and response. In that gap, they asked one question before reacting. Is this meaning necessary? Not. Is it true? Because emotions don't wait for truth. They respond to interpretation. So the Stoic works earlier, at the level of meaning. When jealousy appears, the Stoic doesn't shame it. They ask, what comparison am I making? When anger rises, they don't suppress it. They ask, what expectation was violated? This is why Stoicism isn't emotional avoidance. It's emotional precision. You don't stop feeling. You stop surrendering. And slowly, something shifts. People say the same things. Life presents the same chaos. But the emotional charge weakens. Because your mind no longer hands power away without review. This is how emotional untouchability is built. Not by building walls, but by removing false meanings one by one. 5. Application. Here's how you apply the Stoic rule in real life, without turning into a robot. Step 1 is the pause. Not a long meditation. Just a 2-second break where you notice the first wave. A message gets left on read. Your chest tightens. Your mind instantly whispers, they don't care. That's the impression. The Stoic move is simple, label it. An impression, not a verdict. Then you ask the question that breaks the spell. What meaning am I assigning right now? Maybe the meaning is, if they cared, they'd reply immediately. Or, if I'm valuable, I won't be ignored. Those meanings feel personal, but they're just beliefs. Now you replace the meaning with something cleaner. They haven't replied yet. That's all you actually know. Another example. Someone criticizes you in public. Your ego flares. Your mind says, I'm being disrespected. The Stoic asks, what is truly under my control here? You can't control their tone. You can control your response, your standards, your next action. So you choose a calm sentence instead of a sharp one. You take the feedback you can use and discard the poison you don't need. Another example. Someone you love pulls away. The mind panics and writes a tragedy. I'm losing them. I'm not enough. The Stoic doesn't deny the pain. They refuse the story. They return to the facts. Distance is happening. Then they return to virtue. I will communicate clearly. I will act with dignity. I will not beg for what must be freely given. This is not emotional suppression. It's emotional leadership. Your feelings can ride in the car, but they don't get to drive. 6. Identity shift. Here's where the shift happens, quietly, but permanently. At first, you practice the Stoic rule like a technique. A pause, a question, a better response. But over time, something deeper changes. You stop seeing yourself as a person who gets hit by life, and start seeing yourself as the one who decides what lands. That is identity. Most people live as emotional civilians. They're polite, they're busy, they're trying their best, but they react like the world is in command. A tone ruins their morning. A comment steals their confidence. A delay feels like rejection. They don't call it slavery, but it is. They're emotionally governed by external triggers. The Stoic makes a different claim. My mind is my territory. Not in an arrogant way. In a disciplined way. They don't need everyone to approve. They don't need every conversation to go smoothly. They don't need certainty to stay steady. Because their self-worth is no longer negotiated in real time with strangers. This is what emotionally untouchable actually looks like. You still feel. But you don't chase. You don't plead. You don't defend your ego like it's your identity. You become the type of person who can be misunderstood and remain calm. Who can be disrespected and still choose dignity. Who can lose attention and not lose themselves. And that changes everything about your presence. When you stop needing to win every moment, you start winning your life. Your boundaries become clearer. Your voice becomes slower. Your energy becomes harder to manipulate. People may still press your buttons, but they find fewer buttons to press. Because the new identity isn't someone who must be understood. It's someone who is committed to virtue, clarity, courage, self-control, and inner freedom. 7. Closing, Daily Stoic Takeaway. Here's the daily Stoic takeaway to carry with you. You don't become emotionally untouchable by building thicker skin. You become untouchable by building a clearer mind. Life will still test you. People will still misunderstand you. Silence will still feel uncomfortable at times. But once you understand this Stoic rule, you stop handing your inner peace away so easily. You stop reacting on impulse. You stop confusing emotion with truth. And you start choosing meaning, deliberately. That choice is where freedom lives. So the next time something stirs you, don't ask, "Why does this hurt so much?" Ask instead, "What meaning am I giving this, and is it worthy of my peace?" If this message resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs steadiness, and leave a comment about the Stoic idea that challenged you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. Here, we don't chase motivation, we build discipline, clarity, and a mind the world can't easily shake.